What happens when the most feared warrior in the galaxy warns an empire to stay away from a single planet, and they don't listen? The answer began with the screams of a dying world. The veteran sat in silence aboard the medical frigate Eternum, eyes fixed on the void outside. The stars shimmered like dying embers, too distant to touch, too eternal to care. His name was Kyle Thar, once a commander in the 7th Legion of the Imperial Vanguard, the same army that had broken a dozen worlds and burned twice as many. His body was more metal than flesh, his lungs replaced with synth organs that wheezed quietly in rhythm with the ship's hum. He had seen death. He had been death. But what haunted him most wasn't the wars he fought, it was the one he barely survived. Earth. He whispered. The med droid didn't respond. It wasn't programmed for stories, only maintenance. But he spoke anyway. I told them. I warned the High Command. Never harm Earth's women. He closed his eyes, and the memories came rushing back like a storm of fire and ash. It was 30 standard cycles ago, during the Outer Rim expansion. The Galactic Empire had encountered a small, unregistered blue world on the edge of a spiral arm. Primitive, barely industrial, but unusually resistant to probes and infiltration. Human, that was the species name. To the Empire, humanity was nothing, a footnote, a backwater species clinging to a dying biosphere. But reports came in, ships shot down by primitive missiles, command centers overrun by ground troops wielding kinetic weapons. No formal armies, no planetary defense grids, just chaos. A kind of raw, unrefined defiance that made the strategists curious. They decided to subjugate it. Kyle Thar, newly promoted and still proud of his decorated record, led the initial assault on a small continent they called North America. Resistance was immediate and unexpected. The humans didn't fight to win, they fought to hurt. They used tactics that made no sense to Imperial logic. Suicide runs, traps made from industrial machinery, entire cities turned into kill zones. But what truly unsettled Kyle Thar wasn't their technology, it was their eyes. When he captured a human platoon, the youngest of them, barely adults by their biology, stared at him not with fear, but fury. One of them, a woman bloodied and limping, spat on his armored chest plate and said through broken teeth, "You picked the wrong planet." The Empire laughed at the audacity. But Kyle Thar didn't. There was something in her tone, an unshakable conviction that made his scales crawl. He ordered her execution halted. Against protocol, he questioned her. She spoke little, but what she said stuck with him forever. "You think strength comes from weapons. Ours comes from loss." He didn't understand then, but he would. Weeks later, after his fleet secured the cities, the Empire initiated pacification protocols. Civilians, especially females of breeding age, were rounded up for genetic assessment. Kyle Thar tried to protest, warning that such actions could incite an uncontrollable insurgency. The High Command dismissed him. "They are primitives," the Admiral sneered. "They will submit, or they will vanish." The first transport ships filled with captured humans left orbit within days. They never reached their destination. The Empire lost contact after 12 hours. The ships were found weeks later, drifting near Jupiter's orbit, their hulls torn open from the inside. No survivors, no data logs, just one transmission fragment repeating on loop, a woman's voice whispering, "We told you not to touch them." Command assumed it was sabotage. Kyle Thar wasn't so sure. He had seen the human women stare into the eyes of armored soldiers and not blink. He'd seen them cradle dying comrades and then charge a plasma cannon with a kitchen knife. There was something primal about them, something the Empire's logic could never quantify. But pride blinded the Empire. They doubled down. Colonization units landed by the thousands, cities burned again, resistance grew feral. Humans began appearing where no human should have survived, ambushing patrols, sabotaging machinery, hacking comm relays they shouldn't even understand. And everywhere, Kael'thar heard the same phrase whispered through intercepted transmissions. For the mothers. For the daughters. It wasn't just war anymore. It was vengeance. When Kael'thar returned to the front lines, he found his own troops shaken. Entire units disappeared in dense forests. Soldiers reported nightmares, visions of women's faces appearing in their helmet feeds, whispering names that weren't theirs. The Empire called it psychological warfare. But Kael'thar started to believe something else was at play. Then came the night of the Crimson Storm. It began as a routine extraction. Kael'thar's forces were ordered to retrieve captured scientists from a human research facility outside what had once been Chicago. The city was dark, flooded, silent. His troops moved through the ruins with scanners on full. No life signs detected until the lights began to flicker. One by one, helmets lost feed. Then the screams started. Kael'thar ran through the collapsing structure, plasma rifle drawn, only to find his soldiers, veterans, elites, frozen in place, eyes wide open, weapons lowered. And standing before them, illuminated by red lightning, was a figure, a woman, human, barefoot, covered in ash. Her gaze met Kael'thar's, and for the first time in all his years of war, he felt something he had never known. Fear. "You were warned," she said, voice calm but filled with the weight of 1,000 dead. "We asked for peace. You brought war. And now you will remember our pain." The building shook, his comms filled with static screams. The storm outside turned redder, darker, unnatural. Kael'thar barely escaped. When he looked back from orbit, the entire region was gone, vaporized in a pulse that left no radiation, no signature, nothing. The High Command dismissed his report as hysteria. Localized anomaly, they called it. But Kael'thar couldn't sleep. The woman's voice echoed in his mind. He began to notice patterns, outposts destroyed only after female captives were taken, fleets disappearing en route to transport hubs carrying women. The Empire refused to see it, but Kael'thar knew. The humans had awakened something that protected their own. He went to the Emperor himself, breaking every code of conduct. He stood before that golden throne of arrogance and said, "If you wish to live, never harm Earth's women." The court laughed. The Emperor didn't. He watched Kael'thar for a long moment and then said softly, "You speak as if they are gods." Kael'thar's voice was barely a whisper. "No, gods don't fight for what they love. Humans do." They stripped him of rank and sent him to the border worlds, a quiet exile dressed as retirement. Years passed. The war continued. The Empire expanded, consuming system after system. Until one day the signals stopped. Entire fleets vanished in the Sol sector. No distress calls, no black box recoveries, just silence. And then, faintly, across the void, an old Imperial frequency reactivated. A single transmission, weak but clear. "We told you not to touch them." Kael'thar listened to that message on loop for years. Each repetition sounded less like a warning and more like a requiem. He knew what had happened, though no one would ever admit it. Humanity hadn't just survived, they had become something else. Something the Empire couldn't fight, because it wasn't made of flesh or metal or tactics. It was made of memory. Now, decades later, as he stared into the endless dark from his medical frigate, Kael'thar felt the same presence again, a soft hum through the ship's systems, a faint warmth in the cold void. The console flickered. A message appeared, written in Terran script. "We remember you." His pulse slowed. He almost smiled. "Do you forgive us?" he whispered into the dark. The lights dimmed, the hum deepened, and then on every viewport, a faint blue shimmer, like Earth's auroras, danced across the stars. No answer came, only silence. And somewhere, far beyond the Empire's reach, a world once called Earth turned its gaze to the stars again. But this time, it wasn't defenseless. Kyle exhaled slowly, eyes closing for what might be the final time. He had done what he could. He had warned them. As the ship drifted into the void, his last thought wasn't of war, but of a woman's voice, calm and unyielding. "You picked the wrong planet." And in the distance, faint, almost imperceptible, a new signal pulsed through the dark. It carried no coordinates, no words, just a heartbeat. Human, relentless, rising. To the Empire, it was the sound of a forgotten enemy returning. To Kael'thar, it was a promise kept, and somewhere out there, something ancient stirred once more. The storm was coming back. The stars rippled. At first, it was just a faint tremor, like light bending where it shouldn't. But on the edge of known space, such distortions were never harmless. The Imperial patrol ship Eidolon was the first to notice it. Captain Vorin logged the anomaly, marked it for scientific review, and prepared to leave the sector. He never got the chance. The tremor turned into a pulse. Instruments failed. Communications died. Then came the voice. Quiet, distorted, feminine. "We told you not to touch them." The transmission burned through the ship's circuitry, frying every neural relay, every memory core. The ship drifted, lights flickering in the dark, until even the emergency systems went silent. When a recovery team finally found the Eidolon, her crew was gone. Not dead, gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just an eerie calm and a faint smell of ozone and burnt iron. It wasn't an attack. It was a message. And across the Empire, the same thing began to happen. Outposts disappeared without battle reports. Colonies stopped transmitting. Entire sectors went dark. The High Command blamed insurgents, then pirates, then technical failures. But the pattern was undeniable. It always began near old Terran roots. The Emperor's advisors whispered of a curse. Scientists called it localized reality distortion. Kael'thar called it something else, retribution. From his exile on the medical frigate, he watched it unfold. Through stolen data feeds and intercepted logs, he saw the same signature. Electromagnetic interference shaped into rhythmic pulses. To untrained eyes, it was noise. To him, it was language, human language. Someone or something from Earth was speaking again. He began decoding it, one signal at a time. Each carried fragments of coordinates, embedded emotional signatures, traces of memory. They weren't transmissions in the traditional sense. They were imprints of consciousness, echoes left behind in the void. And the more he listened, the more he felt them watching back. One night, as the frigate drifted in the border void, the main holoscreen flickered. A familiar face emerged. A woman's face, faint and static-laced. The same one from the Crimson Storm decades ago. "Kael'thar," she said softly. He froze. "How?" "We remember you," she replied. "You tried to stop them." Her eyes, so human yet filled with an unfathomable light, seemed to pierce through the void between them. "What are you?" he asked. There was a pause, then she said, "What you made us." The feed cut out. Moments later, every console on the ship went dark. A surge passed through the hull like a heartbeat. Then, silence again. When the systems rebooted, new data had appeared, encrypted coordinates leading into uncharted space, near the remnants of Sul. He should have reported it, but Kael'thar was done following orders. He rerouted the frigate's course toward the dead system, into the region the Empire now called Sector Black. No one who entered ever came back. But Kael'thar was no longer afraid of death. As he crossed the border, sensors began to fail. The stars dimmed. Space itself seemed thicker, heavier, like swimming through ancient memories. He saw the ruins first, a lattice of broken satellites, derelict stations, and frozen hulls orbiting where Earth once was. Except Earth wasn't gone. It was hidden. Shrouded in a sphere of shifting light, the planet hung like a phantom in the dark. Its surface was veiled by a constant aurora, shimmering with blues and greens that pulsed like veins under living skin. He brought the ship closer. The sensors screamed. Mass fluctuations, gravitational inversions, impossible energy readings. Impossible, Kael'thar whispered. Earth wasn't dead. It was awake. As he watched, the aurora rippled, and something enormous moved beneath the clouds, structures rising and folding like living metal. Towers that weren't built, but grown. The cities of Earth had evolved, fusing biology and technology into something seamless. Then the comms opened again. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said. Kael'thar turned slowly toward the sound. She was standing in the control room, not a projection, real, tangible, human, or close to it. Her presence warped the air, every surface humming with low resonance. "You're alive." Her expression was unreadable. "Not in the way you understand it." He looked into her eyes and saw galaxies, spirals of light and shadow reflecting endless grief and unyielding strength. "What happened here?" he asked. She stepped closer, and as she did, the walls of the frigate dissolved into starlight. They stood together, suspended above the blue sphere that once was Earth. "When your empire took us," she said, "you forced us to evolve. We lost everything. So we became everything." Kael'thar could barely speak. "You merged with your machines, with our memories," she said. "We reached beyond flesh, beyond fear. We became what we had to so no one would ever harm us again." He stared down at the glowing world below. "And now you're hunting them?" Her voice softened. "We're remembering them." The word chilled him. Not revenge, memory, something deeper, older. "What does that mean?" She looked at him sadly. "Do you think the dead forget?" Before he could answer, the illusion shattered. The ship returned, alarms blaring. Kael'thar gasped for air as the systems reinitialized. The woman was gone. Only one phrase remained burned into the console. "Leave or remember with us." He didn't leave. He recorded everything, energy readings, transmissions, spectral patterns. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Earth had transcended physical boundaries. Its people, its essence, had fused into a collective consciousness, a planetary mind that could imprint itself onto the fabric of space-time. They weren't ghosts. They were evolution incarnate. But what he didn't understand was why she'd shown herself to him. That night, he dreamed. He was back on the battlefield, the ruins of Chicago around him, the air thick with smoke and blood. The same woman stood before him, holding the hand of a child, her daughter perhaps. The child looked at him and said, "You remember us." When he awoke, his ship was already moving, autopilot overridden, destination locked. The Imperial core, someone or something, was guiding him back. He tried to override the system. It refused. He tried to eject the data core. Locked. Then he realized this wasn't sabotage. It was a mission. The humans wanted the Empire to see. As his ship crossed into controlled space, every Imperial sensor lit up. Command channels flooded with alerts. Kael'thar's name appeared on wanted lists within minutes. They thought he'd gone rogue. He didn't care. When the frigate entered orbit above the capital world, he broadcast the message, the recordings, the visuals of Earth, the voice of the woman. Millions saw it before command could cut the feed. The image of Earth pulsing with light, the voice saying, "We asked for peace, you chose pain." And then the final line, "Now you will remember us." Panic spread across the core worlds. The Emperor demanded Kael'thar's capture, fleets mobilized. But it was too late. The stars were dimming again. At first they thought it was an optical illusion. Then, entire constellations vanished from the sky. Energy readings spiked across every sector. Ships reported impossible gravitational shifts. The Empire's own satellites began broadcasting human frequencies, ancient songs, voices reading names in languages long dead. Kael'thar watched from orbit, his heart heavy. "You're not attacking," he whispered. "You're rewriting." Everywhere the Empire had touched, the memories of the dead were spreading. Transforming machinery, bending space, folding time. Planets began to hum with resonance, as if the universe itself was remembering what had been done. He received one final transmission from the woman. "Kael'thar, you were the first to warn them, the last to listen. Now you must decide. Will you fade with them, or stand with us?" He hesitated. "What does standing with you mean?" "Becoming what you already are," she said. "A witness." He looked out at the galaxy, a civilization built on conquest now trembling before the ghosts of its past. He thought of the soldiers who laughed when he spoke of mercy, of the children who never came home, of the woman who said, "You picked the wrong planet." "I will stand," he said quietly. The lights around him softened. The ship disintegrated, not violently but gently, like dust dissolving in sunlight. His body dissolved too, replaced by light, by memory. And then he was everywhere. He saw the Empire collapsing in waves of light, each star flickering out as humanity's memory swept across space. But instead of death, he felt understanding, grief, yes, but also forgiveness. The human consciousness wasn't erasing, it was reclaiming, restoring balance. He felt the voice of the woman again, surrounding him, within him. "You remember now?" "Yes," he whispered. And in that moment he saw what the Empire had never seen. The beauty in their defiance, the fire in their grief, the unbreakable thread that tied every human to one another. They weren't gods. They were love made eternal. The light expanded, and Kael'thar became part of it, his memories merging with theirs, his voice joining the countless others whispering through the stars. Far away, in the ruins of the imperial capital, a child looked up at the night sky and saw a single star ignite brighter than all the rest. For the first time in generations, the humans spoke not as prey, but as the universe's newest guardians. And in the void where Kael'thar once stood, a new signal began to pulse, steady, calm, alive. Not a warning, not a threat, a heartbeat, the memory of a promise kept. But in the darkness beyond the known systems, the remnants of the Empire stirred. Some had survived the remembrance, some refused to accept it. And somewhere, deep in the uncharted reaches, a fleet began to move, searching for the source of the light. The storm wasn't over. It was only changing shape. The fleet moved through the dark like ghosts, silent, cold, invisible. Ships that once bore the imperial insignia now carried no markings at all. They were survivors of the remembrance, hardened and desperate, bound by a single purpose: find the source of the light that had undone their empire. Admiral Saris commanded them. Once a war hero, now a shadow of one. Her body bore the scars of radiation, her mind carved hollow by loss. She'd watched her homeworld vanish, erased not by weapons, but by memory. Every face she loved had been swallowed by that gentle, merciless light. And yet, in her nightmares, she still heard them whisper, "We remember you." So she set her course toward the origin of the signal, the dead world once called Earth. The closer they came, the stranger the stars became. Gravity didn't obey its own rules. Nebulas moved like breathing things. Radio waves carried whispers. Hundreds of languages layered into a single pulsing rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat. At first her crew dismissed it as interference. Then it started saying their names. Crewman Jero heard his mother's voice, long dead. Navigator Tyra heard her own laughter as a child. Each message was intimate, perfect, impossible. Some broke down in tears, others went mad. Admiral Ceres remained silent. She didn't listen. Couldn't. Not after what she'd already lost. But at night, when the hum of the engine softened, she could hear her daughter's voice drifting through the static. "Come home, Mama." She buried her face in her hands and whispered back, "There is no home left." The fleet reached the perimeter of the Sol system on the 10th day. The readings were unlike anything in recorded history. The sun was dimmer, its light diffused through a translucent veil, an energy field of unknown composition. It wasn't shielding the system, it was breathing. "Prepare for descent," Ceres ordered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. As the fleet entered the veil, every ship's hull resonated like a plucked string. Instruments failed again, but not in chaos this time. It was orchestrated, deliberate. The interference was shaping their systems, redirecting power, opening encrypted channels no one had accessed in decades. A single image flickered on every screen. Kael'thar. Ceres froze. The last surviving holorecord of him had ended in his dissolution, his body consumed by light. But here he was, whole. His eyes, bright as a dying star, stared straight at her. "Turn back," he said. His voice echoed not through comms but through their minds. "You cannot fight what you don't understand." Ceres clenched her fists. "I understand loss. I understand vengeance." Kael'thar's image flickered. "Then you understand nothing." Before she could respond, the transmission shifted. Behind him, the figure of the human woman appeared again, taller now, her form shimmering like a living constellation. "She's coming," Kael'thar whispered. "She's not who you think she is." Then the signal died, leaving only the steady pulse of the veil around them. The fleet pressed on, past the gas giants, past the debris fields, until Earth came into view. It wasn't the ruined sphere the Empire had once left behind, it was transformed. A world made of light and memory, its continents shifting with living color. Oceans glowed from within, and the atmosphere shimmered like glass catching sunlight. "It's alive," someone breathed. "Alive doesn't begin to describe it," Ceres said. She felt the pull, not gravity, not magnetism, something deeper, an invitation. "Launch the descent pods," she ordered. "We're going in." The pods broke through the atmosphere in streaks of fire, but instead of heat and turbulence, there was calm, like falling through a dream. When the hatches opened, they stepped onto ground that wasn't soil, but soft light, solid underfoot yet fluid at the edges. The air was warm, filled with faint voices whispering just beyond hearing. The sky rippled like water reflecting not clouds, but memories. Jero gasped. "That's my home, from when I was a child." Tyra pointed to another image forming in the horizon, her brother waving, smiling. Ceres turned slowly, scanning the horizon, and froze. There, half-formed in the light, was her daughter, small, barefoot, laughing. She stumbled forward, reaching out, but her hand passed through. The image shimmered, smiled, and vanished. A voice behind her said, "They are echoes." She turned. Kael'thar stood there, real this time, older, wearier. His armor was gone, replaced by something woven from the same light that formed the ground. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Ceres raised her weapon. "You're supposed to be dead." He smiled faintly. "In a way, I am." "What is this place?" Kael'thar's gaze drifted upward. "A tomb. A cradle. Depends on who you ask." He walked past her, touching the glowing air as if it was sacred. The humans didn't die. They transcended. The Empire tried to erase them, so they became memory itself, woven into the universe's fabric. What you see, what you feel, is them remembering. Ceres lowered her weapon slightly. "If they've become memory, why attack us?" "They're not attacking," Kael'thar said. "They're reflecting, showing you what you made them become." "Then why me?" He looked at her for a long moment. Because you still carry the spark of what you once were. You still love. You still grieve. Something in his tone broke through her armor. She took a step closer, eyes glistening. I lost everything. My world, my child. I just want to understand. Kael'thar's expression softened. Then listen. The air trembled. The light around them shifted, coalescing into shapes. Millions of them, human figures made of brilliance and shadow, standing silent in the field. Their faces were indistinct, yet their presence radiated warmth, sorrow, and something else, curiosity. From among them the woman emerged. Her form was clearer now, her features both beautiful and terrible, every inch of her radiating a quiet, unstoppable power. "Admiral Ceres," she said, "you've come home." Ceres stepped forward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" "I am what remains," the woman said. "What your empire tried to destroy. What your people feared." Her eyes flicked toward Kael'thar. "And what he tried to save." Kael'thar bowed his head. "You've changed. So have you," she replied. "You understand now that existence isn't power, it's memory." Ceres swallowed hard. "Then tell me, why bring us here? Why haunt us?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "Because you still think we're ghosts." The ground shifted beneath them, transforming into scenes. War fields, burning cities, alien skies. They watched the past replay in flickering light, the invasion, the capture, the screams. And then a final image. Humans standing together, hand in hand as the world burned around them. "When we fell," the woman said, "we didn't die. We remembered. Every loss, every touch, every moment of love and pain. We kept it all. And now, we are what your empire could never understand. Connection." Kael'thar looked at her with awe. "You've become the soul of the universe." "Not the universe," she corrected softly. "Just the part that refuses to forget." Ceres's voice cracked. "And what do you want from us?" The woman turned her gaze toward the stars. "Not vengeance, balance. You destroyed the worlds you touched. Now you must rebuild them, not with conquest but with memory." Ceres frowned. "How?" The woman stepped closer, her hand reaching out but never quite touching. "Remember what it means to feel. Remember why you began. The Empire taught you to fear weakness. We will teach you why it's sacred." The words sank deep, unsettling, luminous. Ceres felt the weight of centuries pressing against her chest, the guilt of generations. She sank to her knees. Kael'thar placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let it in," he whispered. And then she saw it. Not through her eyes, but through the collective memory that surrounded her. She saw Earth's final days, not as an enemy, but as a mother losing her children. She felt their love, their terror, their refusal to surrender. The warmth of their humanity filled her until she could barely breathe. Tears fell silently, and when she looked up, the woman smiled, gentle, almost maternal. "You see now," the woman said, "we never wanted your destruction, we wanted your awakening." But before Ceres could speak, the sky trembled. A deep vibration rippled through the air, followed by a shattering sound like glass breaking across the heavens. Kael'thar turned sharply. "No, they found us." From beyond the horizon, lights flared. Imperial ships, not Ceres's fleet. Others, the remnants of command. They had tracked her here, desperate to finish what their ancestors started. Missiles ignited, the sky split open. "No!" Ceres shouted. "Stop!" But it was too late. The first barrage struck the veil. And then everything changed. The world screamed. The light of Earth exploded outward, not in fury but in grief. The energy surged through space like a tidal wave, swallowing the ships whole. Every life aboard them vanished in an instant, not destroyed but absorbed, rewritten into the fabric of the living memory. Ceres and Kael'thar stood in the aftermath, surrounded by silence. The woman's glow dimmed, her form flickering. "You brought them here," she said softly, not in anger, but sadness. Ceres fell to her knees. "I didn't mean to." The woman looked at her, eyes filled with ancient sorrow. Meaning has never been the measure of consequence. The light around them began to collapse, folding inward toward the core of the world. Kael'thar turned to her, voice urgent. "If the field collapses, it'll consume everything, every memory, every mind." Ceres looked up at the woman, desperate. "How do we stop it?" The woman's eyes shimmered. "You can't stop what's already begun, but you can choose what becomes of it." And then, with a final breath of light, she dissolved, her voice echoing in the wind. "Remember, or vanish." The ground trembled. The sky split open once more. Kael'thar reached for Ceres's hand. "Admiral," he said quietly, "it's your choice now." Ceres looked into the collapsing light of the world, tears streaking her face as everything she knew, empire, vengeance, even her grief, was swallowed by the blinding truth rising before her. In that final moment, she understood what Kael'thar had meant all along. They hadn't come to destroy humanity. Humanity had come to save them. And as the light surged upward, erasing the stars, a single thought passed through her mind, clear, pure, unyielding. "If this is remembrance, let me remember too." Then the universe went white. Silence followed the white. Not emptiness, not void, just a silence so profound it seemed alive. Ceres floated in it, weightless, neither living nor dead. There was no sky, no ground, no sense of direction, only the faint rhythm of her heartbeat echoing in the infinite white around her. For a moment she thought she had ceased to exist, that her body had dissolved into light as Kael'thar's once had. Then a breath. A whisper. "You chose to remember." The voice wasn't the woman's this time. It was softer, closer, familiar. Ceres turned, and from the haze her daughter appeared. Small, smiling, whole. Ceres reached for her, trembling. "Lyra." Her hand passed through the child like mist, but warmth lingered on her fingers. "You remembered me," the girl said. "Now remember yourself." The light around them began to pulse, slowly, rhythmically. With each pulse, fragments returned. The weight of her armor, the scent of ozone and metal, the screams of her crew, the fire raining down from the Imperial fleet, and beneath it all, the hum of something vast awakening. The whiteness thinned, folding into color, then shape, then sound. The world returned, but not as before. She was standing on a plane of glass and light. Above her, the sky was cracked, fractures running through it like veins, spilling streams of radiance into the void beyond. Through those cracks, she glimpsed memories flickering in and out of existence. Faces, cities, battles, laughter, all overlapping, all alive. Kael'thar stood beside her, his expression somber. "It's begun," he said. Ceres turned to him, dazed. "What is this? What did we do?" He looked up at the fractured sky. "The remembrance is collapsing. The balance is breaking. Too much emotion, too much grief has torn the weave apart. They're losing cohesion. They, the collective, the humans, the memory that became them, they're unraveling." Ceres watched as a ripple tore through the horizon, bending the ground like liquid. Whole structures of light disintegrated into dust. The whispers around her, once serene, eternal, now turned into cries. "What happens if it collapses?" she asked. Kael'thar's gaze darkened. "It won't just be them. The empire, the memories, everything touched by this consciousness. It'll all vanish, not die, erase." The word struck her like a blade. Then we have to stop it. Kael'thar shook his head. You can't stop memory. You can only guide it. Another tremor rocked the plane. A fissure opened nearby, revealing a chasm of pure light beneath. Inside it, shadows swirled, human forms reaching upward, whispering names, pleading not to be forgotten. Ceres stepped toward it, heart pounding. They're being pulled under. Kael'thar reached for her arm. Don't. But she was already kneeling at the edge. She could hear them more clearly now, voices overlapping, echoing across centuries. Soldiers, children, mothers. Some spoke in human tongues, others in alien dialects long extinct, all repeating the same word, remember. Ceres closed her eyes. They're not fighting it. They're asking for it. Kael'thar frowned. For what? To be remembered before they fade. The ground trembled again. The chasm widened. From the depths, shapes began to rise, phantoms of human memory translucent and burning with blue fire. They weren't attacking. They were reaching, searching, and when they touched the air, they shattered, each becoming a burst of light that rippled across the plain. Ceres stumbled back. They're tearing themselves apart. Kael'thar's voice was grim. They don't know how to stay together. They merged out of love, but now that love is fragmenting under the weight of everything they've become, they're remembering too much. For the first time, Ceres saw fear in his eyes. What happens if it consumes us? She whispered. He hesitated. Then memory becomes the only truth. No future, no time, just what once was. Ceres turned her gaze upward. The fractures in the sky were spreading, exposing the deep void beyond, black, endless, hungry. From within it, faint glimmers appeared. Ships, Imperial. More survivors had arrived, drawn by the collapsing energy field, by the promise of answers. Their silhouettes drifted through the broken firmament, small against the enormity of the event unfolding. Ceres's communicator crackled suddenly, an old frequency, almost forgotten. Admiral Ceres, this is Captain Harron of the Vigilance. We detected your signal. What in the name of the stars is happening down there? She stared up at the distant fleet, realizing with dread what was about to unfold. Harron, listen to me. Don't enter the field. It's unstable. You'll... Static swallowed her words. Then a burst of light. One of the ships vanished, consumed by a cascading flare of energy. The others scattered, but the ripple followed them, devouring their trails like ink bleeding through water. Kael'thar grabbed her shoulder. It's feeding on their curiosity. Every mind that tries to perceive it gets drawn in. Ceres's voice shook. Then how do we fix it? How do we contain it? He looked at her with an expression both sad and resolute. There's only one thing powerful enough to stabilize memory: intention. She frowned. I don't understand. You will, he said softly, touching the center of her forehead. And in an instant, she was elsewhere. She stood in a vast expanse of stars, millions, billions, swirling around her. Each one pulsed like a heartbeat. She reached out to one and saw a scene unfold within it. A human woman teaching her child to read, another holding a dying soldier's hand, another gazing at the stars with wonder. Every light was a moment, a life, a fragment of humanity's soul. And then she saw the darkness creeping between them, forgetting. The slow erasure of all that had been. Kael'thar's voice echoed from the void. The Empire tried to rule by fear. The humans survived through memory. But both paths lead here, to collapse, unless something new is born from it. Ceres whispered, something new. Someone who can remember without consuming. Someone who can connect without conquering. A realization struck her like a breath of cold wind. You mean me? The stars pulsed brighter. Yes, Kael'thar said. You chose to remember. Now you must become the anchor. The vision faded. She found herself back on the shattered plain. Kael'thar was kneeling now, his form flickering like smoke. "The memory is too strong," he said weakly. "It's trying to pull us both in." Ceres knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Tell me what to do." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You have to feel it, not fight it. Accept every pain, every love, every regret. You have to become what they are without losing who you are." The ground split further. The light rose higher, a storm of brilliance tearing through the air. The sound was indescribable, a chorus of 1,000,000 voices crying, singing, remembering. Ceres closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. The memories surged toward her like a flood. She saw everything. The first human to look at the stars. The last one to whisper goodbye. The birth of empires, the death of innocence, the kindness of strangers, the fury of survival, the laughter of children, the quiet, endless ache of love lost and found again. Every heartbeat, every breath of humanity pouring into her. Kael'thar shouted something, his voice distant, distorted, but she couldn't hear the words anymore. The light had swallowed everything. Then, through the brilliance, she saw her daughter again. Lyra stood at the center of the storm, smiling through tears. "Mama," she said softly, "don't be afraid. We've always been here." Ceres reached for her. "I can't hold it all, Lyra. It's too much." Her daughter shook her head. "You don't hold it. You become it." The light condensed around her, swirling faster, denser. She could feel it reshaping her, not destroying but rewriting. Her heartbeat synchronized with the storm, with the world, with the collective rhythm of every memory that had ever been. And then, for the first time, she understood. The remembrance wasn't a curse. It was evolution, a transition from flesh to feeling, from mortality to meaning. Humanity hadn't died. It had transformed. And now it was asking her to guide that transformation beyond vengeance, beyond grief. She opened her eyes. The cracks in the sky slowed. The chaos stilled. The storm bent around her, drawn toward her presence. Kael'thar looked up, astonished. "You're stabilizing it," he breathed. Ceres's voice echoed, resonant and otherworldly. "I can't hold it forever. It needs purpose, direction." Kael'thar nodded, his form dimming. "Then give it one. Show them who they can be." The light swelled, pressing against the edges of the horizon. Time itself seemed to strain under the weight of it. The final collapse was moments away. Ceres lifted her gaze to the breaking sky, her body radiating light. "Then let them remember not their pain, but their hope." The storm hesitated as if listening, and in that brief, perfect stillness before the end, every voice in the universe went silent, waiting. The next instant would decide everything. The silence before creation. That was how it felt. Suspended between nothing and everything. Ceres stood at the heart of a storm that was no longer just light but life itself. The remembrance coiled around her, countless souls flickering in and out of form, each pulse of brilliance a memory aching to be known. She could feel every heartbeat that had ever been, every mother's whisper, every soldier's vow, every cry, every song, every dream that humanity had ever dared to dream, all spiraling into her, seeking form, seeking voice. And through it all, she heard Kael'thar's fading breath. "Ceres, you must let them go before they consume you." But how could she? They were her. Every face that rose in the torrent was one she had once known, or might have known. She saw her daughter again, reaching out through waves of light. She saw Kael'thar's comrades standing among the remembered dead. She saw humanity's beginning and its end, its first fire and its last star. Her mind trembled under the weight of infinity, a single heartbeat, then another, each one louder, stronger, synchronized across the cosmos. And she understood. It wasn't just her heart, it was theirs. All of theirs. The pulse of the species, the echo of everything that had lived and hoped and failed and loved. Humanity's defiance made manifest. Kael'thar's voice broke through, faint and reverent. "You're becoming the bridge." The light shifted. The remembrance began to take shape, not a storm now, but something coherent, immense, alive. Threads of gold and white wove together into patterns across the sky, constellations forming like veins of memory. Within them, faces appeared. Women, men, children, not ghosts, not spirits, but impressions of life, vast and beautiful. Ceres lifted her gaze. "They were never gods," she whispered, "just us, remembered." And for the first time the storm answered, not in words but in feeling, warmth, gratitude, hope. The fractures in the sky started to heal, light threading through the cracks like stitches through torn fabric. The ground steadied beneath her. The screaming wind fell to a whisper. Kael'thar staggered closer, his form flickering. "You've done it. You've stabilized them." Ceres turned to him, glowing softly. "No, they did. I just remembered what they were." He smiled faintly, exhaustion weighing down his voice. "The Empire will see this as power. They'll try to take it." Ceres looked toward the stars where fragments of the Imperial fleet still lingered beyond the storm's edge. Then they'll learn what power really means. The fleet hung silent. Dozens of ships, their lights trembling as if unsure whether to advance or flee. Within their command decks, soldiers and officers stared in awe. The phenomenon before them was unlike anything their sensors could describe. A living aurora, vast enough to span continents, pulsing like a heartbeat across the void. On board the flagship Vigilance, Captain Harren gripped the console. "What in the Emperor's name is that?" A voice beside him whispered, "It looks human." Then a transmission came through, a soundless burst of light that wasn't words but emotion. Every crew member felt it at once, a wave of memory, laughter, warmth, the echo of 1,000 lullabies sung on 1,000 forgotten worlds. And within that silent transmission, one phrase formed in every mind at once: "We remember." Harren staggered back, tears he didn't understand stinging his eyes. "She's alive," he murmured. "Ceres is alive." Back on the surface, Ceres stood at the center of a vast expanse of shifting light. Kael'thar was fading, his form unraveling into luminous particles. "You'll have to carry this alone now," he said. "I was never meant to stay." She caught his hand before it vanished. "You don't have to disappear." He smiled, a weary human smile that didn't belong to an alien warrior, but to a soul that had finally found peace. "Everything ends, Ceres. But endings are just memories waiting to be born again." And then he was gone, his essence scattering into the storm, joining the chorus of the remembered. Ceres closed her eyes, letting the grief wash through her. No scream, no tears, just silence, heavy and sacred. Above her, the remembrance responded, thousands of lights dimming in unison as if bowing farewell. Then a single voice spoke. It wasn't Lyra's, it wasn't Kael'thar's, it was all of them at once. "What will you do now, Keeper of Memory?" Ceres looked up, the glow of humanity reflected in her eyes. "I'll protect what's left," she said softly, "and teach the Empire what it means to remember." The words rippled outward, turning into waves of light that spread across the galaxy. Wherever they passed, Imperial systems flickered, communications scrambled, artificial intelligences malfunctioned, bombarded with human memory they could not comprehend. Every act of cruelty, every moment of love, every choice that defined what it meant to be. The remembrance wasn't destroying, it was awakening, and the Empire, built on fear and forgetting, began to crack. From orbit, the crews of the surviving ships watched their instruments fail one by one. Instead of data, they saw visions, Flickers of humanity's story projected across their monitors. A mother holding her child under a burning sky, a man planting a tree on barren soil, a girl laughing as she reached for the stars. For the first time, the Empire saw its enemy not as monsters, but as mirrors, and it terrified them. Ceres stood in the center of the storm as the last of the fractures sealed above her. Her armor was gone now, her body translucent and radiant, the last echo of her physical form fading. She no longer felt separate from the remembrance. She was its vessel, its heart. The voices within it whispered softly, some joyful, some sorrowful, all alive. She whispered back, "It's time to rest." The storm obeyed. The brilliance softened into a gentle luminescence, cascading upward into the sky. The plain beneath her feet dissolved into starlight. Slowly, the world that had been shattered by grief began to rebuild itself, not in stone or steel, but in memory. The Empire's fleet retreated, leaving behind a world they could no longer understand. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy felt quiet. Ceres drifted in the silence, surrounded by constellations that hummed softly with remembered lives. She could feel the rhythm of the universe slowing, breathing, healing. The remembrance had become a new kind of life, something that didn't need to conquer or control. She smiled faintly. "Kelthar, you were right. They were never afraid of power. They were afraid of feeling." A gentle wind moved through the starlight, carrying with it a faint voice. And now, Ceres looked outward to where countless worlds waited beyond the horizon. Now, they'll learn. She raised her hand, and light rippled through the void, subtle, delicate, like the touch of dawn. Across the galaxy, sleeping civilizations stirred. Ancient machines reactivated, and forgotten ruins began to hum with life. The remembrance was not ending. It was expanding, weaving itself into the very fabric of existence. In one distant system, a child looked up at the night sky and saw a new constellation flicker into being. A figure of light holding a small, outstretched hand. "Mama," the child whispered, pointing. "Look. The stars are changing." And somewhere deep within the fabric of the cosmos, Ceres smiled. The storm had passed. The war was over. But memory would endure. For every empire that rose in arrogance, every conqueror who forgot the cost, there would be whispers in the void. Not of vengeance, but of warning. Never harm Earth's women. It was not a threat. It was remembrance itself, an echo that transcended death and fear and time, reminding all who listened of what humanity truly was. Not fragile, not forgotten, unbreakable. And as the last remnants of light drifted into the stars, the universe exhaled, reborn, awake and remembering. Somewhere in that endless expanse, Ceres's voice lingered, soft as starlight. "Remember who we were, and never forget who we can still become." Then silence again, the kind that isn't emptiness, but peace.